Hey everyone, welcome back. And today I'm going to be doing what if Turkmenistan decides to form an empire. So, with Turkmenistan now becoming imperial, they decide that before they get full access to the Caspian Sea, they will want to gain some more inland territories first. So, with them declaring war on Uzbekistan, we see that Turkmenistan asks for foreign aid since Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan is roughly about in the same in strength. So, they're able to invade this part as any surprise invasion, but then eventually they're able to invade into here, and then we see a lot of stalemates happening. So, with the Turkmenistans going over to the Caucasus, we see Azerbaijan and Georgia. Probably not Armenia, but let's just say Armenia decides to send some. So, with them sending some troops over, they, uh, with with the Caucasus now sending over troops into Turkmenistan to help out fight against the Uzbek, we see that here in this green line are the Caucasus troops, and they're slowly going over to the Uzbekistanis. One going over here, and then one in the main. So, whenever this war is done, I'll show y'all why I decided to do with these green spots. So, with an with the majority of the Caucasus now fighting over here, we are able to see that they're able to push back a lot of the Uzbeks, eventually forming one singular front, forcing these troops out, and then eventually a few more years of advancing into their territory, they're able to close upon on all sides, and then eventually Uzbekistan surrenders. So with this, we see that Turkmenistan is deciding to declare war on the Caucasus. And then with all of their troops fighting with Uzbekistan, yeah, they're now encircled by Turkmenistan troops and then they're wiped out. So with these troops now fully gone, yeah, they basically don't have an army. So with the Turkmenistan troops now coming over to the Caucasus, yeah, we see that yeah, they're being invaded. Azerbaijan falls, Armenia falls, and then eventually Georgia falls. So let's look at the half of the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty. We see that Turkmenistan annexes all of Uzbekistan and the Caucasus. So they decide to go over to the smaller countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and then they declare war on both of them. And then, yeah, they're no match. So, and also with the surprise invasion, yeah, they have a lot of territory, and then eventually Kyrgyzstan surrenders, and then Tajikistan collapses. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty. We see that Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has been fully annexed by Turkmenistan. So with this, they decide that they would want to no longer be landlocked. So even though they have the Caspian Sea, they decide that they will want to reach the Persian Gulf. So they decide to do any invasion into Iran, and then eventually, like with any surprise invasion, they're able to take over a lot of territory in northern Iran, and I guess they invaded Afghanistan too. So I guess let's just do that. And then with both the presidents saying that their soldiers are invading Iran, they would have to stop or they would have to declare war. And then with the troops already surrounding Tehran on all sides, Iran declares war and Afghanistan declares war. So with the Iran's now cutting them into two, They're able to do some naval invasions into Turan, and then eventually Turan falls, and then they're very weak since their capital's gone, and then they're able to advance more into their territory and into Afghanistan too. So, with the fall of Afghanistan fully surrendering, they go over to put all of their troops over to Iran, even into the mountainous terrain, and then soon they're able to meet up with the Persian Gulf, and then with a few more weeks of advancing, Iran surrenders. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty. We see that Iran and Afghanistan have been fully annexed, so they decided to look over more into the Middle East, and then they see that there is a lot of weak countries. So they decide to declare war on Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel. So, with them already advancing into Iraq, pretty much they captured the capital already, and then Iraq surrenders, making Kuwait surrender. And then, with the civil war in Syria officially ending, Syria surrenders, Lebanon surrenders, and then with Jordan fighting a big front, they surrender, and then Israel surrenders. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty. We see that Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel have been fully annexed by Turkmenistan, and then they decided that they could go to Saudi Arabia, and then they declare war. So with the Saudis, I think probably now equal with this Turkmenistan group or this country, they are able to do a few stalemates eventually once they invade each other. So we see many invasions into both countries, but Turkmenistan has the most taken of damage. But then eventually more troops start coming in. Then they're able to push the Saudis out of their territory completely, and then they're able to do the invasion of their own. And now, with them having full access of the Persian Gulf, they decided to go over to Qatar, invade it, and then Bahrain invade it. So, with these countries now gone, yeah, they're now connecting up with this front, soon pushing them already a lot, and then a few more months of advancing, they're able to capture this part of Saudi Arabia, and then they're able to connect up with this coast. And then eventually, with them already threatening their capital, yeah, eventually Saudi Arabia surrenders. So, with them realizing Saudi Arabia is a strong opponent in the Middle East, they can now defeat anyone except the major powers like India or China, Russia, or even the US, but they managed to take out the strongest country in the Middle East. So with that, let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty. We see that the full annexation of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar. So they decide to send over ultimatums, not wanting to waste any more casualties, over to the UAE, Oman, and Yemen. And then they all decided to agree with the ultimatum, annexing them all. And then soon they have the Middle East all to themselves. And then they decide to go over to Pakistan, requesting for their entire territory. This probably wouldn't happen, but let's just say that it did happen. So with the Pakistanis now gone, they now have a border with India. And then they go over to Turkey, requesting for some territory. Not much, but some territory. So they decided to ask for like 50% of their territory, and then this is what they request. And then with the a lot of Turkish cities like probably major over here. Yeah, they decide to refuse the ultimatum. So with that, they decide to declare war on Turkey, and then they're able to advance a lot. But with the Turkish troops now being a little bit prepared, they are able to cause a few stalemates, but then eventually they're broken after a few hours. And then soon they're able to advance more and then soon threaten their capital city of Ankara. And then eventually they're now bordering some Greek islands. And then Ankara falls. And then eventually Istanbul falls and then Turkey surrenders. So let's look have a piece at the what? Okay, let's look at the peace treaty. So here's a peace treaty. We see that now they decide to annex all of Turkey, and with this, they decide to go over to Kazakhstan and then sending over an ultimatum requesting for their a little bit of their territory and the territory of the Caspian Sea. So basically, they would want this area. So with them refusing, yeah, I think y'all already know it. War. So, with the Turkmenistans now declaring war on Kazakhstan, they are now doing an invasion, capturing all of the Caspian Sea, and now bordering up with the middle part, or I mean, like in the southern part of Russia, in Kazakhstan. So, with them now having the almost full access to the Caspian Sea, they decide to send to Kazakhstan a peace treaty, but then they refuse, asking for their territory back. And then the Turkmenistans refuse, so they start advancing more into Kazakhstan. And then eventually they're able to capture both lakes. And then this part falls. And then eventually a few more months of advancing into Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan surrenders. So Russia sees this as a threat, and then they declare war. So with them liberating parts of Kazakhstan, they are able to advance more, but then eventually they're halted, and then in the Caucasus, they're able to surround them in the Caspian Sea and then cut them off from the Black Sea. And then eventually, they have no more warm water access except in the Baltic Sea, and I guess over here too. But eventually, they're able to threaten Moscow, and then they're able to slowly advance towards it more, and then they eventually capture Moscow. So, with Moscow fully encased, they decide to do a few more invasions into some cities, fully getting Kazakhstan again, and then going more into some more cities, and then eventually getting St. Petersburg, and then now they cannot hold back from the winter, so they send over any peace treaty, and then Russia accepts, and then surrenders. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here we see the full annexation of Kazakhstan, and we see over here that Russia no longer has access to the Caspian Sea and in the Black Sea. So the only warm ocean routes they have is through the Baltic Sea, which they probably can barely do anything since NATO is with this range. And over here, they could access warm ocean right here with the Sea of Japan and this whole entire area. But that's in Siberia, which means that they would have to walk all the way to here, and then which could probably take a lot of months, and then walk back over to the European side. So, with Russia practically extremely weak, yeah, they decide to try to walk over to Siberia, I guess. I don't know, but now Turkmenistan decides to conclude. This is their empire. Hopefully, y'all liked the video, and I'll see you on the next one.